So, thank you very much for listening. I threw a lot of information at y'all, but now I'd like to shift gears into talking about some of the policies that I laid out, and I welcome like any questions. I got a couple questions for you all. But I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can look at all of y'all's beautiful faces. And beautiful. We're here. So yeah, Olivia and Henry, thank you for coming. Naomi, it's great to see you again. And I guess, okay, dipped. So the direct call out, no. I guess I'd first like to start with just asking about like general impressions that you all had about the policies that were presented, if anything was particularly surprising, if you learned something that you weren't anticipating to learn today, and just general feedback or impressions to start us out.
Yeah, hi. Sorry my camera's not on. I am outside, but I originally thought I wasn't surprised that there was a gap in the retribution for using drugs versus alcohol. But that's probably just also a prejudice in my mind because there is a hierarchy of drugs. I definitely don't put weed on the same level as heroin, but maybe that is a problem with how I'm thinking about drugs. But then just thinking about that more, why, obviously they're aware that their students probably use weed at some point in time, but why would they be more punitive? Yeah, that's the word. On it, maybe because us being in Philadelphia and us being so close to really large drug markets, maybe it's a bit of prejudice for that. I don't know, if you're in the dorm smoking meth, maybe they don't even want to begin down that path of you being a student there. But that's just a guess. But yeah, no, it's kind of weird, that discrepancy between the medical marijuana, but then that yes, they see it as a real thing, but because they have to go with federal rules, it's kind of dumb. And yeah, no, that's the end of my thought.
I would like to point out with the medical marijuana that though they, see medical marijuana still as an illegal substance, we still have a medical marijuana research center on campus that Drexel funds very well.
Yep.
Including, okay. I have a co-op through that. So in a way, I have a marijuana co-op, which is very interesting. That I guess technically it's through separate channels, but yeah, technically I don't want to say I'm violating the policy because it's not with physical marijuana, but public health research and marijuana.
Yeah, I totally forgot that was your co-op, because it literally says on Drexel's co-op website, no marijuana co-ops permitted.
Here I am.
Not to pinch you, but interesting.
Yeah. Something that also aggravates me is that they have fines, because if I ever got fined, I'd be like, first of all, I can barely afford going here. I don't think I can afford giving you $100 fine, which is also a ridiculous amount, which actually the $100 fine is similar to the fines they would give. It is similar to fines they would give in Philadelphia and other parts of the state as part of decriminalization. Okay, you're going to be fined instead of being arrested or things like that. So that's a very high fine.
Fair. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reacting.
No, you're good. You're welcome.
You're good. You're fine.
But yeah, no, I think if you're going to say something, if you're going to write about it, you might as well stick to it. And the fact that you're not allowed to technically have a drug-related career or co-op at Drexel, but then you probably, I don't know if you found that through Steinbright, that'd be even more ironic. Just stick to what you said. If you really want to be that hard on it, or don't play both.
Maybe it was outside of the system, but regardless, that'd be if Steinbright ever starts advertising it, that's also another thing. I know so many students who would love to get into industry and then they just can't, considering also we have a dispensary on campus. Oh,
No, no,
Maddie,
no,
I
no.
just wanted to like because since this is still recording, I just wanted to make a note of
Mhm.
that you cannot smoke in the state of Pennsylvania if you have a med card. You can only vape. So technically, like, I mean, people smoke regardless, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to say, like, with a legal sense, you can only vape. So then maybe that also adds to what Drexel's rules are, and that there are no pre-rolled joints. So Drexel might still make that distinction somehow if things change. I wish they had pre-rolled joints. That'd be great, but unfortunately, you can't.
Mhm. No,
You can't
that
even
is-
have edibles in the state of Pennsylvania. Your only edibles you can have are like liquid capsules, basically,
Fair, like
Just
New
no-
Jersey,
and like
something like that too.
RSOs. Yeah, you can't get a cookie here, unlike
No cookies.
Colorado, unfortunately. I don't know what
A
Jack would say
lozenge?
about that.
Yeah, and
Where
that
are
in itself
RSOs,
is already
ma'am?
kind of weird.
RSO, it's like well, technically it's called Rick Simpson oil is what it's called. It's just like little like oils, kind of like in a syringe, and then you can either put on a piece of food and eat it, or you can make it into an
Ooh.
edible. But that's the only edibles they have technically as a med card user. Although still Drexel wouldn't really, I think, care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. And even like, yeah, that definitely just really surprised me with the co-ops, especially. I know that it is like federally illegal, and because Drexel's funding it messes with it. But in states where marijuana is fully legal, like medically, recreationally, like whole 9 yards, even in those states, like students couldn't pursue a co-op with them, and that was just really surprising to me. And like you're saying, like they have a medical cannabis research center, even though it isn't even fully legal in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, and students are still able to pursue internships, co-ops, like. So that's
It'd be interesting to see what happens. I'll do it outside the system, but I want to work at Johns Hopkins for my third co-op doing psychedelic research. So I don't know what Drexel will do about that, but I don't think they're gonna stop me. I won't let them.
Get ready, ambition can't wait.
Ambition
No.
can't wait, except
But
except sometimes, apparently.
yeah, only when it
drugs
comes to
are
drugs,
evil.
then we can wait like another years.
Drugs.
That's fine. Yeah, that's interesting.
Maddie, what were you?
Can
Can I ask you a
What's
question?
up? Go for it. Go live.
No, unless you're gonna talk about this more, I was gonna ask you about what did you mean that civilization is like a natural part of human life that people use drugs? I didn't understand.
I think just from I can't speak on it evolutionarily, but if that's even a word, but just like harm reduction as like a framework is really like acknowledging the fact that risky behaviors like drug use and sexual activity, or even like driving a car, like risky behaviors are going to be a part of just the human experience. Like drug use has been a part of our society for a very, very long time, and likely never will not be a part of our society in the same way that sex has been and still will be there. Driving cars like is very much a part ingrained in our life, and harm reduction is basically acknowledging that fact, and instead of advocating for like abstinence, like no sex at all, or like don't do drugs, like very like historical educational programs like DARE or abstinence only sex education, instead of reverting to that kind of model, it's really acknowledging the fact that, okay, well, that's not really a helpful approach, because people are still using drugs, people are still having sex, people are still driving cars and putting themselves in dangerous situations. So because that's a fact of life, then we're just going to work hard to make sure that the harms associated with those behaviors are minimized. And so like that's where we get into things like overdose prevention sites or syringe exchange programs with like drug use, or even like educating people about like, if you're going to do drugs, here's how you set yourself up to not be in an unsafe situation, or how to have a more positive experience, or know your limits. Or with a car, for example, like fine, if humans are going to drive a car, wear a seatbelt, and we're going to put airbags in the car. So like if, say, I don't know, you crash your car, like instead of like dying immediately, maybe you'll just like break a bone or something like that. So that's kind of what I meant by that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I agree with everything you
I
just
know.
said.
Like,
We have the same thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, just generally, that's like, I would like to see that mentality integrated more into the actual written policies, because again, like that was definitely like a theme in the conversations that we had with student conduct, as far as like they aren't trying to ban drugs from campus or be super punitive or like tell students to stop using drugs altogether. Like even Drexel's drug education modules, they're not about like abstinence only. They're about like kind of encouraging you to look at your substance use and examine the pros and cons of that, and help you kind of just be a more informed, educated, and like safe user of substances. And so I would love, I'm not really sure quite how to do that yet, but I would just like to see that reflected in the language of the policies, and not just in like, once you finally get to student conduct, then you find out that like they're actually not trying to get you in trouble. Like that's not the original intention. All right, that'd be great. Cool. We can move on to, I guess, I'm interested to hear any of your thoughts about like any aspects of Drexel's current drug, alcohol, and amnesty policies that you think are like beneficial to the public health of the student body, if any.
Well, obviously the amnesty portion, always good.
Yeah,
it's almost similar to like Good Samaritan laws in a way.
Yeah, totally.
Which are very important to have. And I know they had what I remember like seeing, I think you had written this on the conduct, that like just because you're under the influence of drugs doesn't excuse some behaviors you do, some harmful behaviors, which is important, especially in like Greek life, or sometimes sexual harassments and similar similar things are happening, and some of the people, you know, might be like, oh, it's because I was under the influence of this or that. It's like that does not excuse it, and you can't really like, I think that's like I think it's like part of their anti-hazing laws also, or something like that, which is like helpful for students, because most people in those environments are usually under or are using some kind of substance.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was pleasantly surprised with the amnesty policy. I thought it was well informed and well developed. But definitely, like, as a policy that's designed to like kind of promote public health and ensure people are safe, I do think the fact that if a non-student finds you in that state, like the amnesty policy doesn't apply to you. I know the policy is designed to ensure that like students in a situation like that would call 911 instead of not calling 911. I still don't think that really takes like a harm reduction approach, or isn't as compassionate to students as maybe it could be. So that's something I'd like to explore with student conduct as far as like changes we could make.
Yeah, and I agree with you. What you guys have started talking, you guys talking over me. I was like, what the fuck? Like, okay, I guess. But I was muted. Yeah. But what was I saying? The fact that it applies off campus is really helpful, because it's terrible to already be in that situation, sick, not feeling like wanting to be there, and not even being in the comfort of a place that you know. I don't understand why, if you're found by a non-Drexel student, like that is immediately a worse infraction. I don't know if it's like saving face or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, like, when you need help, are you limited to any dragon that you can find in the nearby vicinity? That's kind of unhelpful. Yeah, the playing. That's the thing, like playing drinking games with water pong. I guess they don't. I guess they don't want people to get the wrong idea, or like even promote it through visuals. But yeah, what constitutes a drinking game? I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
If there are no substances involved, what's wrong with that?
That was my question when like the RA came into the room and was like, what are you doing? Like, I'm like, I'm drinking water and throwing balls into it. Like, can I help you?
Are you really mad? Do you want to play?
Yeah. Well, I think it did make me think though, like I'm interested in how maybe the student conduct would be different if I feel like a lot of it is designed to prevent like substance use and promoting substance use in like Drexel specific housing because like, again, like if you're playing like water pong at a house party, not on campus, what's what's the big deal? I don't know. It just feels like because it's like a dorm or Drexel affiliated housing, like they don't want any of that a part of it. So maybe that's an approach we can take as well, like creating different violations or like codes for drug policies and alcohol policies that differ based on if you're in a Drexel residence hall or affiliated housing versus if you're in off-campus housing. I think those are different situations that might warrant different policies. But
Yeah,
I agree.
do frat houses and like Summit and those those student housing, they're Drexel affiliated, right? Like it's not just like dorms.
Yeah, they are just, I think.
Okay, because I know that like places in Summit, I know people who have like, put up like empty alcohol bottles as decorations. Nothing
Right.
happened, obviously.
Right.
And I know that beer pong is quite popular at frat parties.
Yeah.
So it's like interesting that, nothing has come up with that.
Yeah, you make a good point. To my understanding, like frat and sorority houses are technically owned by Drexel. Like Drexel's name is on the lease.
Oh,
Yeah, so like
that's new.
to me, I would define that as Drexel affiliated housing. So like, there's a really interesting point that we should
Right,
bring
yeah.
up.
I feel like that's something we should definitely explore just
Yeah.
because I've known a lot of discrepancies. I don't judge what they do in frat and sorority houses. They can do what they want. It's just more about like, well, what's fair? I don't want to make things harder for them, more easier for us. Cause like I've been down, frat row, whatever it's called, Greek row, and like seen people throwing up right on the sidewalk. And I'm just, but like
Disruptive
technically
conduct.
that's not allowed. Technically you shouldn't be throwing up.
Yeah.
You gotta take that and throw it somewhere else, man.
Yeah, go to a different bush, but like
Walk 2 blocks that way.
yeah, just keep walking. But yeah, so that's like interesting because it's like, I mean, I think Drexel definitely sometimes has more priorities for certain places, cares about certain affiliations a little bit more than others.
Yeah, no, yeah, like special privileges for like, because I understand that like frats and sororities, a big part of their culture is like partying and using substances. From my own understanding, not having ever been in a fraternity or sorority, but like, yeah, that's interesting. Like, I'm curious, what would they have to do to be found in violation of the student code of conduct, and like, especially for off-campus parties. I feel like I haven't been to that many frat parties in my experience where it's gotten like broken up because of a noise complaint or like the police or public safety coming through versus like off-campus housing, like that's happened a lot more frequently. And so like, interesting.
It might be because also, well, where Greek or frat row, whatever it's called, it is more like they're all next to each other.
Very true.
Versus off-campus housing might be next to a family. But yeah, there's just, it's interesting to look at.
Yeah, or how, I'm really curious in how they're funded. Like if they do receive Drexel funding to throw like social events where they're promoting like substance use, like that's really interesting. If like behaviors that would be considered, like if they have fraternity and sorority members that are under the age of 21 that are consuming substances, like that is technically a violation of the policy.
Oh, we know that's happening.
Oh, of course. I mean, like
I know
every
but
time
Drexel turns a blind eye.
Yeah. So like, and because that's like what you're saying, like everybody knows that goes down. Like I don't know the Drexel administration. I don't know what student conduct knows, but like it is general common knowledge. It's interesting that that's like permitted. So yeah, I would definitely like to learn more about that. Good points.
What the fuck? Wait. Ooh.
You're right. Like, it's interesting.
Question. In terms of the difference between the drug policies and the alcohol policies, would it be better to bring all the substances on the same level as alcohol or vice versa? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I believe that, well, so the alcohol ones are less severe than the drug policy ones. And so I
Right.
believe that they should all be brought down to the level of alcohol. And when I was meeting with student conduct, they said it used to be at Drexel, like they had a zero tolerance policy for drug policy violations. And so if you were caught with drugs or using drugs, like boom, you're out, like expelled immediately. And so over the decades and years, it's become more lenient, which is cool. And I guess like the sanctions as they are now was a result of their last round of revisions. Because I brought that up when we met with student conduct, and they were like, oh, like that's a good point. Like I don't know why they're different. And I was like, oh, okay, well, great, like cool, talk about this.
Yeah, seems like, well, like what Dr. Blankenot told us earlier, a lot of them are still somewhat similar to ones that were made in the 80s. So
yeah, it's very outdated.
Yeah, exactly. In my opinion, I think I would like to, yes, have it at the same level, but also do what they're doing, like, up to like the discretion. Obviously, I think marijuana is still like very low level, shouldn't really have $100 fine, or it, also depends on what you do. Obviously, if you're selling drugs on campus, that's a whole nother story.
Exactly.
If you're just partaking in it with yourself, that's different. Also, I think it depends on what kind of drug. Not to be like, oh, weed is better than heroin, but it's like if you're using injectable drugs on campus, that might want to be something that's explored. Just because, students need to be cautious about fentanyl now. And if there's going to be fentanyl overdoses on campus, like that's just like more about the safety of students. So then it kind of has to be the discretion.
There, and also publicity. That would be some headline. That'd be terrible.
Yeah, like I don't really think there's going to be any students going to be suddenly having a meth house on their door. I don't think that's likely. But again, yeah, that's like a different thing if you're going to suddenly start doing something like that, It's all like, I think depends on the situation.
Yeah, very true. And I think, definitely just I think for like a first time expulsion, unless you are doing like something really severe, like you're saying, like cooking meth in a house and like selling it to students, like I really don't think expulsion should be on the table, in my opinion at all, but definitely not for a first violation. Like that's something that could really mess up someone's life, maybe a mistake. And they do seem pretty more like geared towards rehabilitation and education and counseling and mental health support, which is cool, but like I'd like to see that even more prioritized. And even though like it's harder, I think, for them to like write into the actual student code of conduct, like written text, official written Drexel text, different strategies or different approaches for different kinds of drugs. I do think either like formally or informally making those distinctions as far as like Naomi, what you're saying, like if a student is like high or smoking weed, like I think that should be approached differently as a student like smoking meth or using injectable heroin. Like again, not to discriminate against certain kinds of drugs, but from a public health and a safety standpoint, like that would make more sense. And like it I don't think that injecting heroin and encouraging other students to like start injecting heroin should be treated the same as like a student that is, like sharing weed. And yeah, that might be difficult to like make written into the code of conduct, but like even just informally, like making just more specific sanctions. And because like again, I think it's a pro and a con that it's like subjective and at the discretion of student conduct, because like great, they can make it personalized to the situation and the individual, but at the same time, like I think that's really subjective to the people that happen to be holding positions in student conduct at that time. And like the ones I got to know seemed really cool, down to earth, but who knows, like they might all leave their positions and people who are really anti-drugs might come in, and if it isn't really specific about this is how we treat students that are going through stuff like this, like if it is so at their discretion, like it could be unnecessarily harmful.
I think when hiring those people, Drexel should definitely have an evaluation of like, well, are you pro-drug, anti-drug? You should be a little neutral at least. Maybe not be like extremely pro-drug or you're just gonna let a stuff slide, but like be neutral enough where but be neutral enough where like you're not gonna be like every student who ever uses drugs is immediately expelled. That would like you have to have someone who, like you said at lunch, hip. Someone who's cool and hip and with it. Just, like
and what was that lunch for and about? I'm sorry, ma'am, if I'm asking questions and taking
Oh,
away.
I'm sorry. It was just I was just alluding to our we had a leadership lunch, but hopefully maybe we'll have an organization lunch at some point when we can do an in-person event.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I really appreciate this. This is a fun conversation. As we're wrapping up, I just want to throw it out. Have anyone have any last comments, questions, things they want to throw out? Because again, we'll be taking like kind of what we talked about in this meeting to inform like our asks of Drexel, or really what like we're going to be working towards this summer term as far as like making changes in the student conduct. So before we conclude, is there anything that y'all want to put out there for that?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate it. You both were very actively participating. And I think we have a lot of really great ideas to bounce off of. And so hopefully we'll have another event in summer term where we'll kind of be updating our members and leaders about like our progress that we've made on making policy changes to the drug, alcohol, and amnesty policies as we see fit. And we'll communicate actively about that process, as well as the fact that for anyone watching this who isn't live here, or anyone that is here, if you want to be a part of the process of informing, giving feedback, or making these changes, please reach out to us at drexel@chapters.ssdp.org, or on our Instagram at drexelssdp. And yeah, we'll have an event in summer to update you, as well as an event in fall that's targeted towards incoming freshmen, and to kind of hopefully share the changes that we've been able to make happen in summer term. So really excited about what we've got going on here, and really appreciate you both being here today. Yeah, that's all I got. So have a great night, and thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, thank you for putting us on.
Maddie.
Bye.
On.